Hi there, everyone. Coming up on the ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol, from CDE, CDPH as well. Plus, we're talking about the next legislative session. We're getting some predictions from some Capitol insiders that's coming up.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And on a Wednesday, we welcome you to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Edgar Zazwata, ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. I'm Naj Alicant, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We're honored to have you here on the holiday edition of the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Edgar, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm seeing if you could do double duty. I know Michael Kelly, our executive producer, is not with us today, so I know you're trying to manage both being host and some of these comments. So let's see if Naj doesn't mess it up. But I have faith in you.
I'm going to do my best today.
I have faith in you, Naj.
Well, you know what? This is what I would ask our loyal viewers. Patience today as I hit the buttons, because we normally have two producers. Gianna Miller, who is currently on maternity leave with her husband, Ben, and with Lewis, their son. And then Michael Kelly, our other executive producer, who went on vacation officially starting yesterday at 5 o'clock. But want to say hello to our viewers, Angela Shell, Sheldon Smith, our first two viewers in the comment section. Go ahead and jump onto the chat. Say hello. Let us know where you're watching from today. We will have a couple of Capitol insiders in a little bit later on in the show to talk about their predictions for the first part of 2022, the legislative session, and also the budget proposal, which comes up in January. Edgar, I do want to just hit a couple of news headlines. The first one, the new indoor masking mandate starts today statewide. Again, the masks are required for all individuals in all indoor public settings, regardless of vaccination status, beginning today through January 15th of 2022. Edgar, I just want to get your take on it. Obviously, we are seeing some uptick in the number of COVID-19 cases. And this seems to be, as we head into a season, into this holiday season where families are going to be gathering, where there's going to be a lot of travel taking place. This seems like a preemptive measure to try and truncate the explosion of COVID-19 cases that we may see.
Yeah, Naj, in many ways, we're ending the year as we started it, right? As we reflect back, as we're doing a lot of reflection here on the last show of the year. You know, in January, we were in the middle of a big surge of COVID, and folks might remember that's when we were having the conversations of what the following school year was going to look like and what restrictions were going to be in place. And we were right in the middle of it. And the state now is kind of taking a step back here to your point, they're a little weary of what may happen on the COVID front. So they are taking some preemptive measure. The statistics are ticking up, cases are ticking up. And obviously, as we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, there's this fear of Omicron and what that may mean. So I know it was not news that was well received in all parts of the state. Yeah. That, you know, now there is no local county by county guideline that this is an indoor mask mandate across the state. Now, you know, there's caveats to everything. There is some exceptions in the Bay Area. So that's something our team and I were looking at. You know, there was a couple of counties in the Bay Area that were given exemptions to this mandate. With that said, on the school front, we already had to have face coverings in schools, but this does apply to other settings. I know I've gotten asked a question about board meetings and such when kids are not there. So yes, at least for a month is what the governor is saying.
And let me go to this story that came out yesterday out of the Los Angeles Times. The LA Unified School Board delays enforcement of student vaccine mandate to fall of 2022. Let me just read this from the LA Times story. The LA Unified School Board agreed Tuesday to delay enforcement of its student COVID-19 vaccine mandate from January 10th to fall 2022, citing concerns over disrupting learning and the monumental task of transferring tens of thousands of students into independent study. The pushback of the deadline, it was going to confront about 28,000 students who had not complied and under the rules would have been barred and moved into in-person schooling and or in independent study rather. It says so far, 87% of LA Unified students 12 and older have shown proof of vaccination, obtained a medical exemption, or received a rare extension, a high rate that the superintendent, the interim superintendent there, Megan Riley, cited when she proposed the delay. I do want to just give this quote, Edgar, before I have you provide some comments on this. This came from school board member Jackie Goldberg. She says, quote, I want to tell those of you who come and think that you helped us push back in talking about those who are opposed to COVID-19 vaccinations. This isn't a victory. You didn't push us back. The mandate will still remain. For our viewers, before Edgar came here to ACSA, Edgar, you were at LA Unified, so I'm hoping to get your reaction as the board makes this decision to delay the implementation of these rules.
Yeah, I know it was not a decision they wanted to necessarily go in that direction. I think there was one board member who didn't vote for the action to delay it. And they've had relatively good numbers. I mean, as compared to what we've seen across the state, I think they're at 86, 88% compliance, or folks have actually got the form back. But again, scope, we're talking about the second biggest district in the country. So that 10, 12% meets a ton of students, as you noted, Naj. And I think that they're concerned about what will this mean for independent study. That's a lot of students who are now not eligible for in-person instruction. So I think they took the perspective of let's hold off here. Let's give folks some more time. Vaccination rates in Los Angeles, generally speaking, as compared to other parts of the state, are relatively higher. So they feel like they're in a better place. Now, as with any of these decisions, it's being met with mixed reaction.
Yeah.
Some folks are like, wait a minute, that sends the wrong message for folks that were complaining about it by pushing this out. On the other end, I think this was an academic decision in terms of is this the right thing to do to send all of these kids to independent study? So it's somewhat of a precursor to what the conversation we've been having on here for months, what we're going to be talking about. We'll get into this with our guest. As we get to some of these headlines from the state, what are the repercussions when we don't have full compliance? And what do we do with these students, namely, who may not go and either get vaccinated or show their proof?
Yeah, let me bring this up because I see that Susan Denton and Kelly Staley asked the question, is it true San Francisco is exempted from the newest mask mandate? That's from Kelly Staley and Susan Denton asking the same question. Edgar, if I read this correctly, San Francisco is exempt from that. That's what I had heard on the news this morning, that indeed San Francisco is exempt from it. So something over there, obviously, there's something positive happening in the San Francisco area that we can look to.
There's a couple, and we're trying to get the details because I actually haven't seen what the criteria that it was, that there was a couple counties granted an exemption in the Bay Area for the mask mandate. So I'm trying to get to, our team is trying to get to the bottom of what was it that the state articulated in these situations about why they were granted the exemption. I presume it is because of the vaccination rates are high, and the exemptions, to be clear, are going to be in particular workplaces, I think gyms and other places where everybody's vaccinated. I think that's the key too, that you have to be vaccinated in order to not wear the face covering.
And just want to make mention, say hello to Julie and Ty. Philip, good to see you guys on there today. Michael and Fermin, good to see you guys on there. Tony Henry, good to see you as well. Okay, as we want to go ahead and bring in our guests here, Edgar, and again, For those of you who are not aware, I'm also pushing the buttons on here. So I am asking for your patience, not just with the attire that I'm wearing today and Edgar's wearing, but also making sure that we can get all of this done.
There's no excuses, Naj. No excuses here. Just don't mess it up. Let's just go that way.
Thank you. Thank you for saying don't mess it up. I do appreciate that. Our guest today, Kathy McBride, Senior Legislative Advocate for Capital Advisors, and Dennis Meyer, the Assistant Executive Director of Governmental Relations over at CSBA. Good to have you guys with us here on the show. I am again going to try and figure out how to make this work. Edgar, trust me. Here, I'm going to make this happen. Hold on. There we go. Look at that.
Mike will be proud of you. I doubted you for a second, only for a second.
I know. You know what? These buttons over here are complicated. Dennis and Kathy, good to see you guys today here on the show. Kathy, I'm going to have you respond to this first, and then Dennis, I'll have you come in after that. So before we move over to 2022, I want to get some reflection on what you think about the year as the year is wrapping up. From a policy standpoint, what do you consider the most significant developments of the last year? So, Kathy, we'll have you start.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, by the way. I was muted, so I couldn't say anything before. I was commenting that I liked my pre-COVID picture that you guys put up.
Both pictures. I have to say, now that you mentioned it, you guys both look very sharp in those pictures.
Very sharp, yes.
Yeah, it was a while ago. Anyhow, so last year, yeah, it's been a crazy, 18 months, almost 2 years now. But last year, the biggest takeaways for me, I think independent study and all of the discussion about that in the state legislature. And, that kind of took a lot of air out of the room as far as policy issues. Also, the unbelievable amount of money that's been available, not just for the entire state budget, but for Prop 98 and for schools. And then so many new programs, right? I mean, I have to tell your membership this. They're implementing them right now, or at least trying to. There's a ton of programs in the budget. I mean, just trying to keep up with it is exhausting. So I think we see that again next year, but definitely if I'm looking back on this year, there was a lot more than we see in a typical year.
And Dennis?
It's almost the same thing, because I was thinking about along those same lines. This time last year we were talking about the same kind of increase in Prop 98, but the difference is we had to dig ourselves out of a hole last year, so the starting point is different this year. But still, budget. Looking back, we were able to get rid of all the deferrals, things like that. So I mean, those were positive developments. The economy is doing a lot better than anyone had imagined. Looking back too at just all the hard work of, with your members at ACSA, our members at CSBA, and keeping schools open. If you remember last year at this time, the discussion was, how do we reopen schools? And what was weird is that this time last year, probably half the school districts in the state were already open, right? They opened during the fall. And so we had to keep telling the administration that is, don't forget, you're going to try to push more money out, but don't forget that other half of the school districts that are already open. So they need to play in that money as well. So, I mean, just looking back, but really the biggest thing is I want to go back 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, the Brown administration and how they addressed increasing funds. And, we're not in Kansas anymore. So new administration, new legislature, they're not as tied to LCFF and subsidiarity. What is that anymore? So looking back, the difference, but then looking forward as we kind of project into 2022, it's a new world. And I think we have a lot of work to do to convince folks that, school boards, administrators, teachers, they know what they're doing, and, they need to be given resources. So let's keep talking, because I think we have a lot to cover today.
Yeah, and we're going to have a lot of new faces in the legislature too, right? With redistricting, and I mean, there's going to be a lot of turnaround.
Yep.
Hey, Naj, before I ask Dennis the next question, I just want to do a little legislative lunch break history. The last time we had our friend Dennis on the show, if I'm not mistaken, he was broadcasting live from an RV, this in the middle of the pandemic. So that's That's one of my highlights here. Now he's back to his COVID corner there. But hey, Dennis, so you and I presented at CSPA conference a few weeks back. Always fun, doing that with Dennis. I know at the conference we were both talking about fiscal forecast, what the LAO was saying, but more what we could expect. So in the vein, and you just talked about it, alluded to it, given what we were talking about in terms on the budget front this year, what do we anticipate 2020 when we're talking about budget, school budget? Obviously we've heard those headlines about the anticipated dollars. How do you see this playing out in 2020, 2022 as it relates to schools? We don't want to go back to 2020.
No, please. 2020 was the longest 3 years of our lives.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
As we, because I just mentioned, this time last year, it's almost, kind of a flashback, although it's a different starting point, but looking at the LAO forecast last year and this year, looking at the reports that were coming out of the Department of Finance on cash flow, things like that, it's almost identical, right? $10-11 billion bump above the budget amount to Prop 98. So that appears to be real because LAO reported it. We're all tracking, the cash coming in, Department of Finance with their reports. It looks as though that's real. So, that's number one is looking into this next budget season is where is the state, meaning the administration and legislators, where are they going to want to see that money go? Yeah. As we're talking to members, and it's our members and yours, and we're all in part of the governance team, it's real critical to put money into the base. So, locally, districts and counties are fearful of, losing the ADA hold harmless. They're facing the fact that the extra help for the last couple of years on pension increases isn't budgeted past this year. There's things like that we really have to work on in this coming year, at the same time that I am just so fearful that the legislature and the governor are going to go, oh man, look at all this money. What press release can we affiliate with this new program? And so I think that's my fear. So good news is on the fiscal front, but then the caution is I'm just fearful of, what is going to kind of come in the form of new requirements, new mandates. The other thing is we saw, kind of when the assembly's talking about their budget plan, they're talking about accountability. So, what are they thinking? We know the assembly budget chair and things going on there, but I'm just wondering what more strings are going to be attached even to like LCFF dollars. That's the thing that we really have to work a lot on as a team in our advocacy, I think, over the next 6 months, just to caution legislators and the governor to we need to fund the base. And there's 3 or 4 things that are a part of that. And I think that's, that really is the caution there. And then lastly is just, where's labor going to be on some of these issues? We just had the passage of the classified layoff date. We all know that is just really rough for school boards and administrators. And I think it's going to be rough on classified. So what else is there going to be on the labor front that's going to try to tie the hands of the governance team as well? So those are just things to kind of be cautious about as we look forward, while we're looking at this infusion of extra money that nobody was really expecting this amount of increase. So,
right. Can I add to that? I think that staffing, of course, is a huge, huge issue, right? And the legislatures, and I think the governor to a certain extent, think that they've done a really terrific job in pushing all the money out, regardless of, that it's all in different programs. But there's just some things that aren't working as well as I think they wish they would have. And of course we wish they would have, right? And I don't think that those issues are going away.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I just want to remind you folks, if you have a question for Dennis or for Kathy or a comment, go ahead and drop those into our chat. Apparently, we're having some issues on Facebook today. Edgar, I promise it's not because I've messed up, because I can see the live Facebook button here, so you can't blame me for that, but hopefully enough of our viewers know to come and watch us over on YouTube. So don't blame me for this one. We're working on it with our good friends over at Facebook. Kathy, let me ask you, because it would be it wouldn't be in our best interest to talk about schools without talking about COVID. Obviously, there are probably a lot of potential fights as we move into the new year with vaccine mandates really at the very top of the radar. As far as capital advisors, what's the current thinking right now on how this will play out in 2022?
I think it's going to, well, in 2015, which is kind of the last time the legislature took up vaccines, it was terrible. It was awful. It was a huge fight, not just in the Capitol, outside of the Capitol. It's political, it's polarizing, it's all of those things. I think we're looking at it to be way worse. I don't think we're in a better place as a state or a country or, just as a society right now than we were back then. And it was a lot easier. So I think it's going to be pretty ugly, actually, in Sacramento. I hope that that's not the case, but if any indication was from what we saw in 2015, it was very difficult. Senator Pan, when he ran the vaccination bill back then, he got death threats. He was accosted on the sidewalk in Sacramento. He's termed out this year, or not this year, it's upcoming year. So we'll have to see how they move forward with it, whether or not they do something regulatory or they do something legislatively. My sense is probably legislatively. The governor's been pretty clear as where he is. It's just, in an election year, we'll kind of have to see how it goes. And with everything COVID related, it's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. I mean, every time we think we're getting some sort of normalcy, there comes another variant, right? Like you guys talked about LA, walking back their mandate, their vaccine mandate a little bit. I think we're going to see that, locally regionalized in the next coming weeks. And then we'll have to see where it takes us next year. We're not out of the clear yet.
LEAs are so much better positioned to know how to deal. I think with COVID, vaccinations are, at this point last year, it was just starting. So looking at that, that helps, but there's still, I think I just read of a elementary school in like Yorba Linda or somewhere that had to shut down a classroom because of COVID. So those things are still real and it's real time, but it's affecting politics and so many other things, not the school site, but also around the state. So
right, and exemptions is going to be the big thing, right? Who gets exempted for what? And I know there's been a lot of confusion about that, even with the executive order that's currently in place.
Naj, I was going to ask Dennis the next question, but given that ridiculous hat, I'm going to ask Kathy instead. I love it. Actually, some people are loving the hat. I hope you actually let me borrow it for our future engagements. Kathy, we just got over the recall, so it's easy to forget that next year's an election year. You just noted. What do we see? And I know November's a little bit far away, but what are going to be the big issues facing schools on the ballot, and how do we see that impacting our work here before even we get to November?
Election
clearly
years.
COVID.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Go ahead.
Okay, no.
Didn't you listen?
Well, I got the hat.
I have a funny hat on. You don't get
You forgot, apparently.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead.
This is part of the uniform. This is not funny to them. So.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. We do have 500 people listening. Sorry, Kathy. Election years are weird no matter what. But, here you're right. So Gavin Newsom did, so he was elected 2-1. He beat back the recall 2-1. But then you're always looking about, okay, then what about the real election? So 2022, a couple of things happening here. One is his reelection, but then also the midterms. And midterms aren't necessarily a big deal here in California because of, the Democrat-Republican split here in California is pretty pronounced. But national politics absolutely is going to play into a lot, I think, of what goes on here. And then looking forward into like the White House run in 2024. So, I am more about policy than politics, but the political stuff is sort of intriguing. But yes, it's going to have an impact. And it's going to have an impact in budget proposals, things like that. As I mentioned earlier, I think, labor will have more of a say, more of a play as well. So, from the management side, we'll have challenges on some of those issues, but, labor and management working together for the common the common interest of schools, I think, are going to be, more challenging as well, just because of that weird, you roll in the dice so many different ways during an election year. And there's just so much mistrust out there at the state level in Sacramento here, but at the local governing board level too. I mean, you have parents coming in and, making threats against superintendents and school board members, things like that. So all of that coming into play, 2022 is going to be interesting, I think, to say the least.
Kathy, I'll let you jump in there and give your thoughts as well.
Yeah, a lot has happened since Dennis started talking because I came back in.
Oh, I did that too, Kathy. Once I accidentally got out and I had to, oh no, what do I do?
So I have no idea what you said, but so I can't comment on that. But yeah, I mean, vaccines, and I think to Dennis's point, like those local school boards are, I mean, that's going to be something like we've never seen before. I mean, we've seen public outcry, and that's fine, and public process is good, but the behavior that we're seeing is just going to turn people off. It's going to be ugly. Also, again, back to the, any kind of variant that we see in an election year, kind of like the last year, when the governor was the one up for, trying to hold on to his job, everybody got a pony, right? So I feel like we're going to see a little bit more of that this year too. And it'll be interesting, like I mentioned earlier, with the redistricting and all of that. So yeah, but I do think what Dennis was saying about national politics playing into it and just kind of the overall tone of where we are politically in the nation is going to play in kind of like never before.
I want to remind you, if you have questions or comments, go ahead and drop those into our chat. Dennis, we have a question that's come in from Nicole Newman. Nicole asks, is CSBA aware and advocating for the districts that lost revenue to support actual students that were in the district and not funded due to hold harmless? Anything you can tell us about that, Dennis?
Well, there's two pieces to that. One is going back to 2020, 21, where enrollment growth wasn't fully funded. So I think that's, so the state forced probably a third of the districts a deficit spend. So that is an unfairness that we would like to correct with this quote unquote new money. But then also, the hold harmless is, as you said, I mean, there is just this natural declining that's going on anyway, but then there are students that are just not showing up. Their parents are holding them out for a week or two, or you've just kind of lost track of them because you don't know even where they went. So those are the issues that I think CSBA and the rest of the education community, and this is where we can agree with labor on, to get some of that covered. There is funding around to soften that decline, and the decline's coming from 3 or 4 different areas. But when we talk about funding the base, hold harmless, things like that, we're covering all of those issues in our advocacy because they're real. They're absolutely real out there, and it's hard for you to project into the future, not knowing, well, are those students coming back? Are they just gone for the month? Where'd they go? And I think that's especially exacerbates the challenge that you're facing right now.
Right. And I keep hearing more and more talk about enrollment-based funding. I don't know if you guys are, but I keep hearing it.
We're hearing about it. Yep. I mean, we expect a couple proposals this year. Sure.
I think we'll definitely see a couple legislative bills, at least to have that conversation. Actually have it, Nick, get across the finish line will be a different story, but I think we'll all be talking about that this year. One more question for me. I know I always joke that we're really good at always talking about the challenges and, what may be a struggle. Maybe let's look at it from a different perspective in terms of opportunities. And, we always try to ask the guests, what brings us hope. 2022, we thought 2021 was going to be that year, right? When 2020 was over, hopefully COVID was on its way down. I think we're realizing that we're in this for the long run, but with every new year comes new opportunities. So we may have lost Kathy. So I'll direct this.
Yeah, it looks like it.
I'll direct this to Dennis. In that vein, where do you think some of the bright spots are as we enter the new year?
Well, the bright spots, obviously the funding, so we're in a healthy year now. So to see that it was real. And so the funding is not only holding, but it's increasing. I think is absolutely a bright spot. And we need to celebrate that. Obviously it comes with challenges, right? The other bright spot is, different between last year and this is the vaccination rate. So, I think it just had gotten approved maybe a year ago yesterday or something, right? So it just really started happening. So the fact that, so many more employees, students are vaccinated, of course, that then leads to the challenge of the vaccination requirements, things like that. But the fact that there's so much more, a larger population is vaccinated, I think that is also a plus. And you know what, the work that the school community has done to this point, we know so much more now about, keeping classrooms open. The default now absolutely is in-person instruction. Last year, it was kind of 50-50, and we were kind of being accused at that point of not wanting to reopen schools. But clearly, everyone's effort now is at keeping schools open. And I think those are three things that I think are really, really positive. Doesn't mean that we can let our guard down or change our strategies. It means we have to advocate more, as much as we did last year, if not more, to make sure that resources are put in the right area, that there's local control, things like that, and that we don't roll backwards. But there are things to look forward to. I just keep joking with my family, like, hey, this COVID thing, we're a fourth of the way through it. They're like, but we really have made a lot of strides, but the challenges are still there. The one thing I learned at my time, I've been doing this for decades, I won't say how many decades, is that, working for school boards and superintendents and business officials, principals, the whole group is so committed to the mission of education that's the one thing that excites me about this challenge from the past 18 months, but even looking forward is, when it comes down to it, everybody on this call, everything, our hearts are in the right place. So I look at that as a plus too, is just the people that are in this business have the right reasons in place. So, that to me excites me. And it's one of the reasons why I can do this day in and day out and not tire. It's just because the people that are on this chat right now, the advocates here, same commitment. And that to me is exciting. So that's another bright spot, but that glow has been glowing since day one, but it's even brighter right now. So I'm really encouraged. I'm really encouraged.
Well said, Dennis. Kathy, I know we lost you, and you're an ACSA employee, a former ACSA employee. You can't blame the ACSA Wi-Fi on you going in and out, but maybe we'll give you a chance to respond.
We can't even blame Kevin Gordon and Jack for it either.
No, not on this. Oh, we could always blame them for
absolutely.
In short, bright spots, opportunities in 2020.
Two of the things policy-wise that were, the state kind of committed to, but not fully 100% last year, were universal meals for students. I can't say enough about how the nutrition folks stepped up, under COVID and made sure that not just students, but their families and communities were fed. If we can really make that stick around, it's such an unbelievably important thing to do. We talk about it during testing. We should be feeding these kids all of the time, whether they need it or not. I think it makes a huge difference. Universal TK still, there's a commitment there, but it's not necessarily all fully funded, and there's barriers to that. And then, I had the pleasure yesterday of going down to Los Angeles and actually getting into a school and speaking with the people who were doing the work, and they were helping teenagers who were foster youth and on probation, and they were making sure that these students were getting through the system and completing their high school graduation. And just to see the passion and the connection that they have with those students, it's unbelievable. It was so good to see. I tried not to cry, but it's really, the passion that folks have in this business. And, as a former alum, I had the opportunity to meet and talk and learn from, all of the ACSA members. You guys are really doing it. You're getting it done. And that's the most important thing. That makes me very hopeful.
I do want to point out as we close, you have seen multiple wardrobe changes during this holiday edition of the lunch break. We've seen Dennis switch out the hats. We've seen Edgar sans jacket, but we have not seen anything overly festive over in Kathy's house beyond that tree. But Kathy, I think I noticed, is that a Grinch cup there?
Yes, this is my resting Grinch face.
That sounds about right. That sounds about right for Kathy.
Actually, my husband's cup.
Yeah.
That's my husband's cup. And then of course this pillow. But this is more Dennis than anything.
Oh no, I am so ready for Christmas.
Kathy McBride from Capital Advisors, Senior Legislative Advocate, Dennis Myers, Assistant Executive Director, Governmental Relations over at CSBA. Kathy and Dennis, so honored to have you here on this last show of 2021. Have a great rest of the day and a great holiday as well.
Thank you both.
I'll do the same.
And Edgar, I do want to bring this to your attention as you and I get ready to close this out. This is the 44th show of the year that you and I have done. That is including special editions, our normal Wednesday broadcast, our 3 conference shows that we did: Leadership Assembly, Superintendent Symposium, Personnel. An incredible run of 44 shows that we have done this year. I obviously, our viewers have made such a huge difference, and we thank you so much for having been with us. But I just want to get, Edgar, your final thought as we head into 2022. You've had this great discussion here with Dennis and Kathy. Your thoughts as we move into 2022 and that next legislative session.
Well, first of all, it's news to me about 44. I might have guessed 144. So,
I did
so maybe I would have been a little bit off, but no, it's been a great ride. It's been fun doing this. I'm glad we're able to get hopefully a little bit of information in a lighthearted way sometimes during difficult times to our folks. And I think my reflection is kind of what our colleagues said. There's obviously the challenges continue. I know we beat this to the ground. Our folks would live this every day, so it doesn't matter whether we say it or not. Their experience is that in many ways the third school year impacted by COVID, and this has been maybe the most challenging of the 3, right, for all the reasons stated. And we'll see around the corner how 2022 is going to continue to bring some of the recurring challenges that seem to come in waves, right, where it appears unfortunately that we're approaching another wave of infections, hopefully because of all the statistics we've talked about, vaccination rates, that we can mitigate the impact. I think some of the political battles that we're going to face in 2022 are going to be difficult. I agree with both Kathy and Dennis that, these fights over the vaccine mandate, whether it's going to be codified, whether there's going to be a personal belief exemption, I think that not only is that going to be the biggest issue in education, it might be the biggest legislative issue just across the board. So I think us trying to gear up for that and also just support our folks along the way. I mean, really the folks who, unfortunately, a lot of this is playing out in Sacramento and sometimes DC, but the folks aren't showing up in many cases to their doorsteps. They're coming to you folks, right? They're coming to your board meetings. You're getting the anger. So I think us just trying to support our members as we're continuing on this journey. But I think, to echo some of the positive notes that our colleagues were talking about, that there is going to be some resources. It's about, advocating to make sure that those resources are spent in the right direction, that that they really take into account the perspectives of the folks who actually have to implement all this. So I am, always cautiously optimistic that there's some of these things that our folks have done a really good job over the last couple of years of expressing the challenges. And I think it has had an impact in the policymaking process, not in every case, because there's stuff that they do over and over again that we don't completely agree with. But I think that they're at least listening, and there's an opportunity for us to advocate our message there.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree with that. Edgar, enjoy these couple of weeks off, folks. We are back that first week of January as we move into the next legislative session. Edgar, it's always fun. It's the highlight of our week. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Happy holidays to your family, to everybody out there. And hopefully our folks really, I know this is hard, but able to step away from it and take a nice break here over the next couple of weeks.
Yes, I would agree. Thank you, folks, so much for joining us here all year long on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. We are off for a couple of weeks. Hope you are as well. But then we're back with that, with our first broadcast that first week of January. Until then, have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.